Have you ever wondered if you can actually pursue a career in writing? Like, if you're called to be a writer, if this is something that you are meant to do? Well, friends, if you've ever asked yourself that question, I'm so excited that you're here because today I'm going to be discussing this question with a very special guest whose story I think will inspire you and give you a completely new light on this question. Hey friend, do you love the smell of books? Maybe you absolutely delight in the sound of a pen gliding across a page as you write. Hi, my name is Shira Rodriguez, and I am a Jesus follower, a writer, entrepreneur, and lover of all things boho and books. In this podcast, I want to take you on a journey of discovering yourself, discovering God and your passions, and how to make your life beautiful and so full that it overflows into the lives of others. And over here, we are not about compartmentalizing life. Oh no. Over here, we talk about holistically taking your life and presenting it as a place where others can be blessed just by knowing you. Are you excited? I am. So snag your favorite mug of tea or a pen and paper and let's jump in. Because you're listening to Her Reading Life podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Her Reading Life podcast. I'm so absolutely thrilled that you were able to join me today and tune into today's episode. If this is your first time, hi, my name is Shira Rodriguez. I am an author and a podcaster, and I love just creating this space where you can just feel at home and feel welcomed. So imagine that you're across the table from me and my guests at a coffee shop and just drinking in not only the nice hot coffee or the, hot tea, if that's more your taste, but you're also drinking in the beautiful ideas and thoughts that I hopefully will be able to share on this podcast. As crazy as it sounds, summer is already upon us, friends, and we are halfway through 2024. It sounds absolutely wild, but it's true. We are halfway through the year, and I hope that your summer has been absolutely amazing. Mine has been wonderful and wild because I've been working a lot on the podcast, on Instagram and marketing, and also with the short story for the anthology. Between, promoting it and getting the beautiful responses from beta readers and all your support. Truly, thank you so much, each and every one of you, for your support. It's been absolutely wonderful to be able to hear your thoughts on this collection of short stories, and your excitement it's just warmed my heart so much. You guys have all been so sweet. And so I am so absolutely thrilled. It's been crazy, but wonderful as well. I hope that you guys have been enjoying some lovely summer books. I have as well, and I should be possibly doing an episode on that sometime soon, on some summer books that I've been reading, and like a halfway kind of check-in on my reading for this year. But I am also super thrilled because today I have a guest for you today, and I'm so excited about this guest because he has such an incredible story that I want to share with you guys. I can't wait for you to listen to it. I'm not going to say much more about the subject that we're going to talk about, because it's better that you hear it from him, truly. But before we jump into our conversation with my guest today, I'd love to introduce him to you. Jake Lynch is an author specializing in contemporary religious fiction and action-adventure novels. Having grown up under the teachings of Rick Warren, he has a strong devotion to God and actively seeks to love on others. When he's not writing, he's usually surfing, doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and watching anime. I hope that you will enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed editing this. I hadn't listened to it for a little time because I pre-record my episodes, my guest episodes, before I air them. And listening to this once again just inspired me so much. And it was just so lovely to be able to be inspired by Jake once again and hear his amazing story. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Her Reading Life podcast. And today I am so excited because I have a guest with me on the podcast. And I was so excited to be able to invite him because his story is truly one that I think we all need to be reminded of in so many ways to just remind us that God is really working in our stories. And I think I have never heard anybody's story involve God in such a beautiful, detailed way in the writing process and in the writing world as much as my guests today. His name is Jake Lynch. So, I'm so grateful to be able to have you on the podcast, Jake. Welcome.
Thank you, Shira. I'm super happy to be here. I really appreciate this awesome opportunity.
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad you were able to take some time to just join me on in the studio today. But something I'd love to hear is your story because I remember I listened to another podcast where you were sharing your story, and once I heard that, I was like, "Okay, my listeners have to hear this because it is so good and so powerful." What's your story? What inspired you to start writing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of backstory to that question. And so, like rewind to when I was in a sophomore in college, and I had just finished a very stressful semester. And so I got this impression on my mind to write a book about a janitor. And that was kind of unique because I had never gotten an impression to write a book before. And I was also, not a huge book reader and not a huge book writer either. Like English was not my favorite category in high school. I'm sorry, high school teachers, if you're listening to this. Um, and so I had met a janitor on a train over the past summer that year. And that guy was such an influential figure in my life for some reason. Just like he was super kind to me and nice and talkative, that he just was super encouraging. And so, fast forward to when I got the impression to write a story about a janitor or include a story of a janitor, this idea didn't go away. It didn't feel like an anxiety driven idea. And so I'm like, okay, I need to sit down and pray about this because I wonder if God's trying to tell me something. And so I grew up at Saddleback Church, and Rick Warren at the time told us that if you want to hear God's voice, then stop listening for a voice and start looking for a verse. And so I applied that principle, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to read the Bible and see if God's trying to tell me something. So I sit down and I pray for a couple minutes in total silence. And I'm like, God, do you want me to write a book? And so I flip open to where I was currently reading in the Bible. And that actually has more backstory to it as well, because I flip open to the book of Isaiah that's located in the Old Testament. And I actually had gotten another impression to start reading the book of Isaiah specifically, and that was unique because I was reading in the New Testament, nowhere near that at the time. So I flipped to Isaiah and started reading that. Months went by, and then I get the impression to write the book. And so I pray, God, do you want me to write a book? And I flip open to where I was reading in the book of Isaiah. And the first words that I read were, write these words down, write it in a book. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 8, New Living Translation.
Wow, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
you have it down packed.
Yeah, it helps to remember that for when people ask you about it. I'm like, "Yeah, like, that is the verse, that is what happened." But, like, after that, I read that, I look up and I'm like, "Wow,
Yeah.
like, you can't get any clearer than that." And so I'm like, "Okay, God, I guess I'm writing a book now." And so after that, I started writing for an hour to 2 hours a day, and I was like 18, 19 years old at this time, and I had never written anything in my life. So just the prospect of God calling me to write a book was huge because I had never done that before. And it's very hard, by the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I love how it was kind of like an impression that you got, like just this inspiration, this moment of inspiration that you were able to kind of detect, oh, maybe God has something for this. And the fact that you were able to realize that if something was not going away, if that idea was sticking in your brain like bubble gum,
Yeah.
it's it means something. It's not just a nagging idea. Many times that's how God speaks to us through inspiration, and I love how you just delved into his word to be able to get a confirmation and as a part of that. And it's so easy for us to think, especially as writers, we're like, "Oh, our faith life is one thing and our writing is another." But no, really the artistic process and just the process of writing is in itself, I think, a divine one because God is the ultimate creator. And when we are creating, we're partnering with Him. Just learn from the divine creator, the one who created us. I mean, hello, who's going to make it as perfect as He does things? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I love having that creator's perspective now. And
Yeah.
just the process of writing this book has taught me to view life more from a creator's perspective. And that helps me actually a lot in the way that I go about my day because I don't believe in coincidence anymore. Because whenever you write two characters that meet in a story, you're like, that's not a coincidence. The author knew they were going to meet.
Yeah.
And like I view that more these days, and it helps relax me and not take life so seriously. No, not as seriously, not as stressfully, I guess, if that's even a word.
Yeah.
I have a lot less worry nowadays when I just trust God with the process. And I'm like, He's the creator of my story, and He knows that, there are good times and there are bad times, but in the end, He's got the ultimate destination in mind, and He wants me to have a happy, long, and loving life. And I'm good with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I feel like even in stories, we have characters that they have a goal, right?
Yeah.
They have a goal at the beginning of the story, and in some stories they don't make it, but for the most part, in most stories they make it there. But often the way they get there is not at all like they expected it to be.
No.
And that's, I think, the beautiful thing about just kind of submitting to God and his process is that we can trust him as the creator. He's gonna take us maybe a different route than the one we thought. It might take longer, it might take shorter, but he eventually gets us there to where we need to go.
hmm Yeah, you're 100% right. And it's that journey that He takes us on that's ultimately what's best for us, even though we don't realize it. We don't see that at first. Like if we see the challenge in front of us, but God sees the process and He sees who we become, through that. And it's ultimately what is best for us. And like He wants us to be happy through it. And so it's a wonderful process of being called, you know, like realizing that as you go through this, that you're like, oh, maybe I can do this. And like God really can use me for greater purposes than my
Mhm.
own. And it's wonderful going through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I feel like sometimes the process, even though it's painful, and we'll talk a little bit more about the process later, but even
Yes.
though it's hard, it's exactly what makes us the people that can write the books
Yeah.
because we become stronger people as a result of life processes and even the writing process where you have to, go back to square one sometimes. But that gives us so much perseverance. It grows us, it makes us stronger, it makes us better people too. I think it builds our character.
Yeah, and it's those hard times that we go through that are the most influential of changing our character. And,
Yeah.
as I write a lot, I draw back to the hard times in my
Yeah.
life, and I use that as a medium for guiding the story and where I want it to go and what message I want to portray through the stories. And so it's those painful moments that we may not like them, but it turns out that pain can sometimes be a blessing in disguise.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. And it's easy to see it in a book when we can kind of see, okay, this is what the character is going to go through in the span of these pages of this storyline. But in our lives, we don't know what that thing is, what that goal is, and maybe
No.
we want to kind of learn what our desires are. I'd love to hear, as someone who kind of felt like a confirmation from God to push you to pursue writing, what would you say to our listeners who aren't sure what exactly they're called to do? What would you recommend for them to do, like in a practical sense?
In a practical sense, I would say keep trying new things. You may
Mm,
think you might not like something, but you don't really know until you try it and do it for a little bit.
Yes.
And that's where you truly experiment and learn more about yourself. Like you think like we think we know so much about ourselves, but the reality is we don't know that much about ourselves. And God, who is our creator, knows everything about ourselves. And so it is better to trust him with this. And so we have to try a lot of new things to see what God is calling us to. And you may find that something you hated originally will be something that you like in the future, just like I did with writing, because I hated it at first and then I liked it later on. And then a second part to that would be it takes time, like not everything is going to be have a direct conversion today, or like, oh, woke up today and then tomorrow I'm going to go on a mission trip or whatever. It's like not everything's going to be so sudden as that. There is a gradual buildup to these things. And so sometimes you have to go through some time in life to experimenting with a lot of things to see where God is truly calling you to be. But just know that I know it's going to be hard right now, and that you might be going through some tough times and you're wondering, what is God calling me to do? I've been asking for so long. Just know that in the long term, God does have a plan for you, and he is guiding you to where he wants you to be. I
Mhm.
asked that question a lot of when I was, swapping through a lot of different jobs trying to find out what he wanted me to do. But it turns out I wanted to do writing, the whole time, and I didn't even realize it. So God is guiding you to where you want to be. You just don't realize it yet, and you might not see it until maybe years later.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And I love how you pointed out, like, try new things because we're so scared sometimes of trying new things because we think, oh my goodness, what if we fail? What if this doesn't work? What if, we create these crazy scenarios in our heads. But I mean, think about it logically, okay? And I'm not I'm not the best logic person, but like just common sense. What is the worst thing that can happen? Truly, what is the worst thing that can happen if maybe you try writing and you realize this isn't something for you? What's the worst thing that can happen? I mean, you just do something else. You find something, okay, that's not going to work,
Yeah,
scratch that, on to the next thing, because there is always I truly believe that God has built each one of us with unique talents and a unique tool set, that he has actual people that he wants to use you to reach and to minister to in different ways. And maybe this means as a writer, maybe this means as a nurse, maybe this means as anything,
yeah,
anything at all. Maybe it'll be a combination of things that it needs to be that combination of things, And I truly believe that God never wastes anything. So even any experience that you might have will only serve to make you stronger. And so, yeah, I love how you mentioned that. Have you ever passed a book at Target with the label #1 bestseller and dreamed of having your own book cover with those same words embossed on your cover? Oh, don't lie. I know it has, because I do that all the time. Now, the long and short of the matter is the title best selling book is really not about the quality of the book, it's about how well it's sold, because it's a best selling book. And a lot of this boils down to marketing. Good marketing can take an average book and make it reach thousands of readers, while bad marketing can rob a good book of so many hearts and hands. That's why I've started to build my platform long before I ever had a book to publish, using my email list, this podcast, and Instagram. And today I'm so excited because I get to share with you a secret little collection that has helped me jumpstart and rethink my own Instagram strategy. As an author, I don't have time to waste unnecessarily on social media platforms, and divvying myself up between them all is absolutely exhausting, as if writing wasn't already. So that is why I want to save you time on marketing so you don't have to fuddle around like I did. In fact, I have a content calendar that is actually ready to simply plug and play. In addition to 100 post ideas, 50 reels ideas, and a customizable content calendar, and so much more. Snag your own copy today at bio.site/Shira G. Rodriguez. That's bio.site/Shira G. Rodriguez, or click the link in the show notes below. Hey there, lovely listeners. I have the most fantastic opportunity to share with you today. How would you like to join the street team for Novelists in November short story collection featuring my very own short story, which you'll be the first to discover the title and story blurb if you join? This enchanting anthology is launching this November, and I'd be absolutely delighted to have you join us. Picture this: dark academia vibes, cozy sweaters, rain pattering on your window, and all your favorite bookish feels with a mug of hot tea or pumpkin latte. That's the essence of this collection. By joining our street team, you'll get exclusive behind the scenes info, early access to the cover, sneak peeks of the stories, first dibs on pre orders, and some very special gifts I'm personally designing just for you. And the best part? There are no requirements. It's super flexible to fit your schedule. We're planning an exciting cover reveal in June and story and title reveal earlier in the month. Plus, you'll get an early ebook copy of the anthology and see our book cover before anyone else. So, if you would love to be part of this cozy autumnal adventure, click the link in the show notes and join the rest of our bookish friends on the street team, or visit bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. That's bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. Thank you so much for your incredible support and enthusiasm. I'm truly grateful for you, and I can't wait to see you on the team. Hey there, listeners. Before we dive back into today's episode, I want to take a quick moment to talk about something really important. Reviews are the lifeblood of any podcast. They not only let us know what you're loving about the show, but also help others discover the beauty of living, giving, and repeating. So, if you're enjoying the content we're putting out, here's a small favor I'd love to ask. Could you take just a minute or two to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform? Whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform you listen on, your reviews make a world of difference. By leaving a review, you're not just sharing your thoughts with us, but you're also helping us climb the charts and reach more listeners who might benefit from our discussions. Plus, it's a wonderful way to show your support for the content you love. So friends, if you're finding value, inspiration, or even just a good laugh in any of these episodes, please consider dropping a review. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. And hey, if you want to go the extra mile, share the podcast with your friends, family, or anyone you think would benefit from these conversations. Together, we can create a community of listeners who are engaged, inspired, and ready to take on the world. All right, that's enough from me. Let's get back to the show. Thanks for being the wonderful, lovely, incredible listeners you are. And as always, enjoy the episode.
Yeah, yeah, you do a great job explaining that. And it's that fear that tries to keep us in place to
Yeah.
prevent us from learning all those things. And that was one of the things of like that I asked myself when I was starting off writing this, thinking, oh, I don't want to do this writing. I want to go watch TV or go hang out with my friends. And what I learned is that, I spent a long time trying to learn how to write this book, but after I went through that whole process, I thought to myself, what would I have been doing if I wasn't writing the book? And I know the answer. The answer is I would just be watching TV or, doing something else. I'm like, I wouldn't be doing anything that important. So it wasn't wasted time,
Mm-hmm.
because I was intentionally going through the process and trying something new. But in the long term, it proved to work out very well for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. And on the heels of the previous question, I'd
Yes.
genuinely love to hear your thoughts on writing, specifically as a calling. So, like, just narrowing down, is writing a calling and why or why not? I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
I do believe that writing is a calling. I feel like,
Yeah.
well, you touched upon that a little earlier. You said it can be
Yeah.
anyone from a nurse to even a janitor. Like God calls us to the unique roles in our lives that He created us for, and writing can be one of those callings. And it's a wonderful place to explore your imagination, but also a place to use your imagination to help others in a way that you never imagined before.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I remember in our pre-call, I told you, I was like, I would love to hear your thoughts. I have my thoughts, but I would love to hear your thoughts. But yes, same. I honestly believe that writing, like, yes, there are people who, are born Mozarts or something, they are practically born writing stories. I get it. There are people like that. But just because you weren't born like that, you weren't born with a pencil in your hand, doesn't mean that you're not a writer. But I do believe that it is still a calling. If you have a passion for it, if you have a burning desire for it, I think that that is absolutely a calling, whether it's to write a memoir, a fiction story, a nonfiction story, or just that you love writing. I don't believe God gives us these desires for nothing. I think He's a very purposeful God. He's a very purposeful creator. He's a very purposeful writer of our own stories. And I think that He absolutely gives us callings and feels that things that would just give us so much joy when we do them, that we
Yeah.
just feel alive when we do them. And if you're not feeling alive, I remember we were talking about this and you mentioned this, in the pre-call. If you don't feel alive doing something, maybe that's just not what you're supposed to do. I mean, yes, like, the writing process, it is hard. There are days where you're like, "I just wanna give up." You're slamming your face against the desk. Um, and it's real, like, it's real. The struggle is real.
Good
But
times.
at the end of the exactly, yeah. But at the end of the day, we all, like, when we see that book in our hands or just see even, like, the printed paper, we're like, "Wow,
Yeah.
okay, that was worth it."
Worth it. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that drove me was when I was writing this book, I'm like, I know that God is going to use this to change someone's life. And so it was that drive to reach that person
Mhm.
that kept me going. Like, I didn't write this book for myself, not because I wanted to. I wrote this for the people who are going to be reading it. I
Yeah.
wrote this for God who called me to write it. And it was one of the unique parts about it. I didn't do it for joy at first, but I later found the joy in it as I start to learn the craft of writing. I do believe writing is kind of an art style in its own way, the same way a musician creates music or an artist, paints on the canvas, and writing is a art in its own way. And I love that. And yeah, it's I always find the uniqueness in my own journey, like you mentioned earlier, of how like I didn't have any aspirations to write. It just makes a story all the more unique because like I wasn't a huge reader. I mean, there were some books that I liked, sure, but not a ton. But I never had a dream to write a story at all until God put that idea in my mind. And I wouldn't have done it unless God told me to do it. So I just love that uniqueness of that story and how God is using that to help people through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, and I love how God just literally just had to push you. He's like, "You're going to write."
He's like, get on with it, dude.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. Something I'd love to hear a little bit more about is in your book, Broken to Beautiful, your main character struggles with depression and suicidal thoughts. As a male author, how
Uh,
did you tackle writing from this genuinely challenging perspective? Because I am a female author, but I honestly would find, like, this perspective really challenging, just me, myself, because these are difficult topics and you also have to have a degree of sensitivity when
mhm.
tackling these topics. How did you approach writing this project? Wow.
Like there are multiple factors that come into play when I answer this question because there's not one definite thing that stands out. And when I was writing this story, I wasn't trying too hard to create a character that was too far away from my own personal mindset. So I didn't think too hard when it came to, am I capturing the female mindset? And for full disclosure, well, I don't know. It's just one of those things that just developed over time that I didn't think too hard about. And
Yeah.
it does add to the uniqueness of the story because I'm a male author who wrote a story from the perspective of a high school teenage, girl. And I also have no sisters. So that's another interesting fact about me. But like I don't know. It's like when I was making Crystal, the main character, I didn't
Mhm.
try to make anything too different from my own mindset, I guess. I focused a lot more on her like inner thoughts of what she was dealing with the suicidal thoughts and the depression that she was going through. But also just fitting in high school. I just took a lot of experiences from high
Mhm.
school that we've all gone through, the awkward times, the good times, and just threw that all together throughout the story. And like there are some like, touching moments in the story of like, like I know there's a hair braiding scene. I talked with you a little bit about
Yeah.
that at, on our pre-call. Like that was pretty fun to talk about. But I don't know, like it was interesting writing it from a female's perspective because I learned that there are some differences between men and women because like, guys might pay attention to one thing more than a woman does. And so like the beauty factor was one thing to think about for the girl. And like when I was writing her, I'm like, does she feel pretty?
Mhm.
Because every woman wants to feel pretty and every
Mhm.
woman is beautiful in their own way. So it was I don't know, it just gradually developed over time. I'm not a genius at this or anything.
Yeah.
This is my first novel, so I'm like, I don't know, it was weird, and then by the time I finished writing the story, I'm like, "Huh, I have a lot of female characters in this
Yeah.
story," and that actually, like, plays into another factor because I'm like, should I make the main character male or female? And like by the time I wrote most
Mhm.
of the characters, I'm like, well, I don't want the main character to be a male because it would then have him go and help all these, females with their like problems. And then
Yeah.
it would seem more like a romance story. And
Yeah.
that's not what I wanted to portray. This is more of a story about friendship and developing community and finding
Mhm.
hope and sharing each other's burdens rather than, oh, this is a romance novel and everyone's like, kiss, kiss, kiss. I'm like, no, 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 no. This is
Yeah.
more personal and intimate in a connection way.
I love that. Yes. And that's actually perfect because I love how you pulled that out about like the different genders like serving different roles, even like in storytelling, where I do think that in a group of guys, it's going to be very, very, very different, the dynamics. And so exploring a theme like that is going to be feel very different as opposed to like a group of females, you know, sharing and healing and things like that. So I love that you pointed that out. I love that. And yeah, actually, if you want to, you can absolutely share the story, the braiding story about how you learned how to describe
Oh,
that scene with the braiding scene.
well, what they're like, yeah, since I am a guy, I did have to do some homework for some of the things.
Yeah.
And like back in college, I had, a couple of friends who were just hanging out braiding their hair. And and I just asked them, "Hey, could you teach me how to do that?" And they're like, "Sure." And so they taught me how to braid hair. And it was pretty fun actually. And I'm like, "Oh, this is kind of fun." Uh,
I love it, yeah, and actually it's really funny because as writers, we do research on the most random things just to be
yeah.
able to write things in the book.
Yes.
So, like, we're like, "We are experts at this one niche thing that you probably do not care about unless you're me and you're writing a book."
That's right. But that's why those people get brought onto documentaries.
True. Exactly. Yes.
Exactly. We're experts in our own way, just without the schooling.
Quite. Quite so. Yeah, what are some ways I'd love to hear, what are some ways that you ensured you exhibited empathy while addressing this really sensitive topic and while still keeping yourself emotionally and mentally healthy? Because I know, at least, from my experience, I find it really challenging to write these stories where you're dealing more about with suicide and, depression just because it can be a very challenging thing to read, like, as a reader, but also to write, because as a writer, you have to get in the mindset of that character, especially
Yes.
if you're going to write it well, you have to go there mentally, and, I mean, people might say people might say it's just, you're just typing words on a computer, but no, mentally, you have to get there to be able to describe it, and you even sometimes I'll even come out of my room and I'm like, I am emotionally a little drained after writing that scene or whatever. Or for example, a scene where I have one of the characters going through grief. I'm going to feel a little bit emotionally heavy just from writing that. I'll feel more tired and I'll even write a little bit less sometimes when I have to go through those scenes because it's just hard. I would love to hear how you exhibited empathy for your characters and also as a writer and telling your story with empathy when addressing this really sensitive topic while still keeping yourself mentally healthy and emotionally, well.
Yeah, so like because I had gone through those difficult times and I had made it out because God helped me, I felt a lot healthier in talking about it
Mhm.
than if I would have written about it when I was going through, depression and suicidal thoughts. Like God comes into play a lot in regards to
Mhm.
talking about it like this because if I didn't have God in my life, then it would be a lot harder to talk about this stuff. And like the way that it plays out in a practical sense is like I feel like God is supporting me in a way, like a subconscious way, like He's guarding my heart
Mhm.
in a sense and like placing protections over it to where I can talk about my dark past, but I don't have to feel the full dread of it at the same time. Yes, the pain and the memories are there, but I also feel healthy enough and supported enough to know that no, I do have hope because God has a plan for me and that things will get better because God wants me to, do well and to use my pain to help others. So it actually felt good because now I can use the pain that I went through to help others. And so, in the way that God helps support me and just keeps my heart hopeful, is a way for me to be able to talk about this so casually, actually, and to
Mhm.
put myself out there. Because, like you said, like when you're writing this stuff, you tend to get a little emotionally involved. I get a lot of emotionally involved. Like
Oh,
every
yeah.
emotion that my characters feel, I feel it as I'm writing it and like that place is like a lot of stress on your mind. Like you get tired after writing such an emotionally heavy scene. And with just like the thoughts that Crystal is going through, I'm like, I just took all the thoughts that I had and just put them in there. And
Right.
like the dialogue was dark. And sometimes, like, yeah, it does touch a nerve because I'm like, oh, I don't like hearing that or I don't like reading that. But as long as I provide the hope with the
Mhm.
darkness, then it's okay for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you did like two things that you said. The whole part about God protecting your like almost subconsciously protecting you. That's so beautiful. I love that. And I think I just thought of this. I was like, that's such a good idea to just pray over your writing and to just ask the Lord to like as a writer, just to protect your emotions, protect your heart and your mind, especially when you have to go through these tough scenes because stuff happens, okay? It's in the Bible. Just read the book of Judges if you don't believe me. It is chock full of this crazy stuff. So obviously, God knows all the crazy stuff that goes on, but I think that it's so precious when we're able to come to him and ask him to protect our hearts and our minds because we do have a message that we want to share. We do have things, but sometimes you need to go a little further into the dark in order to shine a light because sometimes those stories are not as impactful when they're just, everybody's pretending that everything's okay, everything's sunny. We can't see the redemption of God in a place where it's not dark. You can't be set free if you're not held captive for a little bit. And I love how you were just saying that God was just protecting your subconscious and your in your heart. And I love that. It's so beautiful. Because that I think that should absolutely give us more confidence to delve into deeper topics, especially as Christians. Because sometimes we tend to veer away from those dark topics, those hard
Yeah.
topics, but it's essential to deal with them. We can't just hide under a rock. Now, I'm not saying that we should again like explore gore or things like that
No.
or excessive violence, but be realistic because this stuff exists in the world. And we can't just pretend that it doesn't exist. And so I love that so, so much. Okay, so I think that was absolutely incredible to listen to. Just as I was editing, it was so incredible to listen to this story that Jake shared again. And truly, It inspires me every time to have eyes ready to see God's fingerprints, even in the writing process. It truly is so inspiring, and I'm so absolutely delighted that Jake was so kind as to come onto the podcast and share his story and share even little bits of, the writing process and how he did research and how he really created these characters for his book. Definitely tune in next time because we're going to be talking about the writing process. And I mean, when you draft, when you revise, how to know when your story's working and when it is definitely not working. So I am absolutely thrilled for you to be able to listen to that. So tune in next week as I share the second half of our conversation together. And as always, until next time, friends, continue to live, give, and repeat. And I'll see you next week. Yay! You did it! I'm giving you a lovely big virtual hug because you just finished another episode of Her Reading Life podcast. If you'd like to access all the wonderful links I mentioned in this episode, visit my website at bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. That's bio.site/Shira J. Rodriguez. There you can access my blog posts, resources, and so much more. Also, check out my Instagram page for more inspirational content. And join my email list for insider secrets and exclusive updates on special events. The links are in the description box below. Also, if you could take a minute and leave a review for this podcast, that would be amazing. We're able to reach so many more people because of your reviews and ratings. I can't wait to chat with you next time, friends. Keep living, giving, and repeating.